Welcome, everyone, to the MMA Happy Hour podcast. I am Kyle Anthony, your host, where today we are talking UFC Vegas 106, headlined by Michael Morales and Gilbert Burns. We're going to be breaking down 4 plays here on the show today. Now, last weekend, boy, it could have been a magical Saturday if Manon Fior got that W. We had some great reads overall. We had JDM at plus money, had the hobby plus money. I mean, we were really making some good reads, but the one that we really would have had a fantastic night was on Fior, and I thought she really could, get it going. That first round, Shevchenko, credit to her, smacked around Manon. That pretty much, I think, was the game changer for that fight overall, but really could have been a great night. But with that being said, let's dive into the main event of the evening between Michael Morales and Gilbert Burns. Now, got a massive line here. You've got Morales minus 800 on the comeback here on Burns plus 550. Now, looking at this fight here, you've got all the hype on Morales and for all the right reasons, you know what I mean? All the right reasons here. He's 17-0, 25 years old, an explosive fighter, has found some finishes and has looked good. And the one thing that you consistently see is that he continues to get better. He definitely continues to get better overall. But when you're looking at this line, it's pretty disrespectful. I gotta say, it's a pretty disrespectful line overall. But when you look at certain things, and we talked about this last week when we were breaking down, Medellena versus Bilal, and we were getting into that fight. And the big thing that I had said even last week here on the show was, sometimes you're catching a fighter at the right time. And this is pretty much that, where I think that Morales is really fighting Burns at the right time here. Burns now is 38 years old. There's a 13-year age gap between these two guys. And another big thing here is that he's on his retirement fight. So there are multiple layers here that really does provide opportunities, I think, for Morales. Now, again, we're talking about this line. It is absurdly wide, but again, he should be a strong favorite in this spot here. Now, you've got that, that Burns, he is a high-level grappler. We know that's pretty much what he's going to be looking to do. That's what he's mostly known for. He is a tough fighter overall, but this is the spot here where I do think that some of the more recent performances weren't as good. And that may be a little bit different than some people may say, because last week we were talking about, JDM versus Burns and how, Burns kept it close, and Burns, had a chance to get the victory there in that, by decision, if he could kind of get through that third round. But you got to look at the situation here. And again, that was a one-armed JDM, that still was able to find opportunity, was still able to get the finish. And I think it's really also the fact that I just think that Burns is on a downturn. Even his, fight against JDM, he only landed 27 significant strikes. So it wasn't that, Burns had this sensational performance. It was pretty much keeping him down, looking for takedowns. He had 7 takedowns in that fight. And even against, most recently for Burns against Brady, again, these are high-level guys, so I do understand that, but Brady outlanded him 130-47. So these are, I just think this is why he's starting to retire. This is why we're seeing him come to the end of his career. And I think that you got Burns also the fact that he's undersized for this division. There absolutely is no doubt. And plus the fact that we've been looking this fight here, Morales is going to have an 8-inch reach advantage, a 3-inch height advantage, and that's going to be huge here. That's really going to be huge here. And you also got to add in the fact that he's going to also have in Morales, he's going to have the strength advantage. He's going to have the physicality advantages here. And I think that this is going to be a spot here again where and I said this last week about, JDM and Bilal, that this is going to be the best version of one fighter and maybe the worst version of the other fighter. And that's kind of here where I think you could see, as we're seeing Morales consistently get better, consistently grow within this sport. I mean, he's 25 years old. He's only going to consistently improve. And this is Burns on his retirement fight. So I don't really see this being some great performance by Burns. At this point, he's making money outside the UFC. He doesn't really have to do this anymore, at least from what I'm gathering. And that just kind of seems where this is at this point, where Morales in this spot here, I think, and to get this number down smaller, obviously we're talking about a minus 800 number here, is that I do think that Morales finds a ton of success on the feet. I think that he's going to land big, land hard. And I think that also that Burns is a guy that, he's looking for a scrap. You know, he's the kind of guy at this point, we've seen him, he's looking to throw. He doesn't have the technical skills, but he does have the heart. He does have the willingness. He does throw with some power, and there are going to be some of those things. But I think he's going to land big time at range. I think he's going to really hurt him. He's going to fight very well behind that long jab. And I do think that the apex cage is also going to provide possibly some more violence here, where these two guys are going to be, you know, I think standing in the center of the cage, throwing down. I don't think either one is going to be looking for well, maybe Burns, but I don't really think he's going to find much success. And I don't really see Morales looking for that many takedowns. I think this could be a showcase of him standing, of him striking, of him landing. He's the bigger, faster, you know, harder hitter between these two guys. I think this 13-year age gap is really going to show its face also here. So in this spot, I'm going to take Mike Morales by knockout. That's around -140, -135 now on the market. And I think that's a great spot, a very likely outcome. And we're getting a very better price compared to that -800. So I'm taking Michael Morales by knockout -140. The next fight here we're going to be talking about is going to be Nursultan Ruziboev. He is -300 on the comeback here. We got Dustin Stoltzfus +240. Now, overall, I couldn't be much lower on Dustin Stoltzfus. I just really could not be much lower on him, on his skill set, you know, the type of fighter he is overall. I'm just, there's nothing that I have seen from this guy that has made anything really, you know, ooh, this is going to be an opportunity for him here. I think this is an absolute smash spot for Ruziboev. The line is also, you know, indicating that as well. Ruziboev is a sizable favorite here, but I do think that there are multiple issues here for the Stoltzfus side. And I think the first thing here and the biggest red flag in this fight is going to be the fact that Dustin Stoltzfus is very hittable. I mean, this guy, you know, he just walks into punches, he blocks punches with his face, and just doesn't have the awareness. And that is something I think that's very, very important in this fight here, is the fact that, you know, there are people that can have some lackluster defense or, you know, these kind of things. It just almost seems like, you know, Stoltzfus becomes a, tunnel vision. And when he's walking forward, he just doesn't have that awareness to stay protected, to kind of block. Even when he comes in, he's a kind of a high risk, high reward type of fighter. He'll do a lot of stupid things. He'll make mistakes. And this is something that I think this is just who he is as a fighter. And I think that, you know, I don't really see a very high ceiling for him overall, where Ruziboev, I think, is a guy that UFC could kind of back. A UFC, you know, he's a tall guy. He's a big power hitter. He's a finisher. I do think that's where we're going to see this here. So, you know, you're going to see Stoltzfus come forward. You're going to see him throw, but I think he's going to absorb massive amounts of damage as he's coming forward here. And that's the thing with Ruziboev, as I was just saying. He's big. He's long for this division here. He's going to have a 5-inch height advantage, a 1-inch reach advantage. And I do think, yes, the 1-inch reach advantage, you know, is one part of this, but also the fact that him being 5 inches taller is going to make this still very difficult for Stoltzfus, who I don't find his striking very good, to kind of get in there and land, you know, big headshots, land these kind of opportunities. And I don't see that really happening here. I think that the power hitter here in Ruziboev, he's going to land the bigger shots. He's going to have a very hard time, I think, at Stoltzfus cutting that distance and finding opportunities to land. And overall, I think in the pocket, he's going to be very hittable. And I don't really see the combinations very well for Stoltzfus. I mean, the guy's sloppy. He can be wild. There's times especially where, you know, if he gets hit, he can start to wilt a little bit. You can see that from him very quickly when, you know, fight isn't going his way. You know, the guy can start to shell up and just not want to absorb that kind of damage, where I do think by far Ruziboev is the far more cleaner technical striker between these two guys. And I think that the openings that Stoltzfus provides in the pocket, in those exchanges, I think that's where you're going to see Ruziboev land. And I think the only real way that Stoltzfus finds success is through his wrestling, is through getting takedowns. And that I also am, yes, he has found, opportunities in the past to get some takedowns and, you know, look for some control time here. But I think, again, Stoltzfus cutting that distance, he's going to struggle with that. I don't think he's going to find success. I don't think he's going to like the power that's coming back to him. I don't find Stoltzfus as this hard hitter, regardless of what happened against Marc-Andre Barriault. You know, I don't really find him to be this, you know, this deadly striker by any means. And I think that Ruziboev can keep this standing, you know, defend the takedowns. I think he has shown that he can have the get up game. You know, we've seen that from him, where even if he gets taken down, he's very quick to get back to his feet. And one of the other things too is that Ruziboev, I think he's 4-1 or 3-1 in the UFC. but his only loss is to Joaquin Buckley, who is just been absolutely fantastic, has looked great. And plus that fight was at 170. So Ruziboev at 6'5" went down to 170, and now he's back to 185. Definitely a more suitable division for him. So I just think that that's, was a one-off for him there. But I think this is a spot here that Ruziboev is going to land the big shots, land the far harder shots. And I think this is a spot here where he's going to, how hittable Stoltzfus is. I think that's where this goes here. So getting off the minus 300 number, you can get Ruziboev by knockout, another spot for a knockout. It's about a pick 'em price tag. You're looking at about a minus 115 price tag here. I think that's where this goes. I think there's a high probability that this happens in the first or second round. And if you want to go that, you can maybe get a better number. But in this spot here, I am going Nursultan Ruziboev by knockout minus 115. Next one here we're going to talk about is going to be Jared Gordon minus 112. And the comeback here, you've got Thiago Moises minus 108. Now, Moises is a well-rounded fighter. The guy's got some pretty good technical striking overall. We've seen him. He has some solid leg kicks. He's added that in there. And really, if he finds the opportunity to really spam those, he has found a lot of success doing that. And also, we do know that when he's on the ground, he is, a pretty slick grappler. He will be opportunistic with his submission game. He will, find opportunities to just control position. And if he can get you down there, there is going to be opportunity for him. I think my biggest issue on the Moises side is really his low volume. And that is a big, big issue for me here, where I think that that's really, repeatedly we've seen him just not really push any type of pace. He's kind of allowed opponents to kind of, stay within, smaller margins, not really extending himself. And it's just really what he's done. Even in the Trey Ogden fight, he landed 55 significant strikes. But even in that fight there, it pretty much Ogden handed Thiago the victory and made some mistakes, allowed him to get it. And then even the fight before that against Ludovic Klein, he landed 24 significant strikes. So this is a guy that is consistently low volume. And not only the fact that he's very consistently low volume, but it's also the fact he has a negative striking differential, meaning he's getting hit a lot more than he is throwing and landing on his own. And that's the spot here where you look at, he lands 2.5 significant strikes per minute while absorbing over 4. Now, that is, I think, very important in this fight, especially of who he's fighting, because the path and the way that really Gordon finds a lot of success is the fact that he is a high volume, high pace type of striker. And that, I think, mixes very well in this fight here against a guy who is hittable, who takes a lot of shots, and who also doesn't really push the pace. And you have to kind of counter volume with volume. And if he's going to sit back and allow Gordon to kind of take over the fight, I think that's really where Gordon can find success. Gordon lands nearly 6 significant strikes per minute. That's double what Thiago throws out there while absorbing less than 4. So it's interesting enough kind of how that pans out. But I do think that, he's going to absolutely push the pace in Gordon. He's going to push that pace. He's going to try to keep Thiago on that back foot. I think Thiago's going to look to chop at the legs a little bit, but I think Gordon is going to push forward, keep that volume going. And that's really going to be a spot where I think he can chip away on the rounds if he needs to and really kind of dictate the pace in that way. And, Thiago may look to wrestle, which is, an opportunity for him here if, Gordon is going to be pushing that pace and he's going to look to try to change it up. That can be something where he's going to say, hey, let me level change. Let me, control some of the action here. But I do believe that Gordon has the wrestling, has the better wrestling in this spot. I think he can defensive wrestle. I think Gordon is the one, if he needs to, that I think he will find the wrestling success if he needs to, if he's landing and says, hey, let me change the pace a little bit. I think that Thiago will struggle getting some takedowns here. Even if he does, I think that Gordon is going to have enough to kind of get back to his feet or control position. And I also do like that his durability, Gordon, yes, he's been rocked and wobbled, here and there, but overall, the guy showed a pretty decent chin, and I don't think that Thiago is going to hurt him. So I do think that when he comes forward, he's going to be able to absorb some of those shots, cut the distance, get his hands on him. And overall, you got to remember that, Gordon should have beaten Paddy Pimblett, which was an absolute robbery. And we all know why. But then, even most recently against Nazareth Hatbrast, that's a fight was a split decision, which I thought Gordon won. So even at 36 years old, there is I think it was a 5 or 6 year age gap here. That there is that. I think Gordon has looked better and better as he's kind of going through his career and maybe even be peaking at this point where I am just not that impressed with Thiago overall here. So in this spot here, I'm going Jared Gordon to get the victory at minus 112. And the last one here we're going to talk about is going to be Rodolfo Bellato. He is minus 520 on the comeback here. We've got Paul Craig plus 350. Now, I'm not going to dive into this one here too much here, but this is another spot where I do feel like one fighter is clearly on the decline here. You've got Paul Craig now. He's 37 years old. He's 1-5 out of his last 6. I mean, just has not really looked good overall. You know, the only victory that he does have is against Andre Muniz, who is not good himself either, who is pretty much shown to be, I don't really even think a UFC caliber type of fighter. And this is pretty much what, you know, a UFC aging out vet does. You know, you start to lose. UFC kind of keeps you around a little bit, especially Paul Craig. He's a respected vet in the game, you know, a known name, and they kind of use him to kind of prop up maybe another guy in the UFC. And I'm not saying that Bellato is some top level fighter. He is far from that. Bellato has his own issues as well, but I think in this particular matchup, he matches up pretty well because of the stylistically. Now, I do think, of course, we all know Paul Craig, you know, the guy is elite level grappler. You know, this fight gets to the ground. He is lethal. You know, it's just, you know what you're getting from him if this fight gets to the ground. Now, the issues are the fact that he doesn't have striking. And you know, I just don't really see the striking. Not only that, he's got very basic combinations, no real power. There's just a lot of things that on the feet, I don't really see much of what he's going to present here. And that's something that, you know, you've seen from him is the fact that you haven't seen improvements. You know, you haven't really over years and years. Paul Craig is Paul Craig. Paul Craig from Paul Craig from, you know, 5-6 years ago is the same fighter. You know, doesn't have striking, but if he, you know, he can be very opportunistic with his submission game. If he gets you to the ground, he's going to latch something in. And I don't really believe that that's really what Bellato is going to look to do. Is he really going to look to take Paul Craig to the ground? Bellato is a good grappler himself, but I don't really think he's going to dive into the teeth of the only path to victory for Paul Craig is a submission victory. I mean, that's pretty much all that he's got going on here. And, you know, not only the fact that Paul Craig doesn't have the best striking, but he is an elite level grappler, but he doesn't have wrestling either. And if this guy ever, if he ever at any point prior decided to say, hey, let me just figure out this wrestling thing, he would be really finding a lot of success in the UFC because once he gets guys to the ground, he is lethal and he just doesn't have the striking to cut the distance or the wrestling to get the fight to the ground. And his inability to do that limits his paths to victory. And that's where I think Bellato does find a lot of success here. So I think Bellato is a physically stronger guy. I think he's got the better striking, not saying that he is this elite level striker, but he is going to have the power. And that's kind of where I'm going with this fight here is the fact that, you know, you've got Paul Craig, 9 losses, 5 are by knockout. And that's where I'm seeing that this is a spot where I believe that Bellato is going to land those bigger, more damaging shots overall. He's going to move forward. He's going to look to exchange. And I don't think he's going to have to worry about any of the power coming back from Paul Craig or takedowns. So in that spot here in the apex cage, I think he can stand, he can throw, and I think he's going to land the bigger power, more damaging shots. And that's where I do believe that Bellato gets the knockout. So getting off the minus 520 number, I'm going to be taking Rodolfo Bellato by knockout minus 140. We're taking a lot of knockouts here, a lot of violence that I'm seeing here on Saturday night. So there you have it for my plays for UFC Vegas 106. If you want to become a client, link down in the description. And we have been crushing it with the hero parlay that I always post before every UFC event on Twitter at Kyle Anthony UFC. We've hit 2 of 3 of those. Last weekend we hit a plus 1,000. I think it was the week before that we had a plus 900. So we've really been hitting those. I post those for free. So check that out. That was a nice one there where JDM closed out the hero parlay. So with that being said, let's get that money this Saturday and let's cash.